Hey there, I'm Sharon Welch, and welcome to A Brave Journey, the podcast to help you throw out those legacy belief and identity stories that you've been lugging around on autopilot for decades, so you can jump back in the driver's seat of your aliveness again. When you change your mind, you change your life. Are you ready? Let's get into it. It'll be fun. I recently got to sit down with Elaine Tsung, who is the owner of Manifest Digital, a web design and marketing company. She also has a really large social media presence. She is a 30-something woman who began her own journey of exploring, reinventing, and refining her identity in her 20s by taking risks, asking questions, and just always striving to be herself. I actually met Elaine a few years ago when I was starting my own journey in building my business and finding ways to market it. And what I recognized in myself was that in the way that I was raised in my generation and what I knew, I needed an update to my skills and to my mindset. And so I sought out Elaine to help me do that and to be able to learn from her. And it seemed uncomfortable at first to put my trust in someone who was a generation younger than me. And I can tell you it's one of the best things I ever did. Her fresh perspective really, really helped me at that time when I was starting my business. So we had an interesting conversation about her own journey, as well as the parallels there are between the pressure we feel to be somebody else's curated version of ourselves online, just as we do in real life. I hope you enjoy it. Okay, I am so happy to have Elaine Tsung here today with me. I've known her for about 3 years, and I'm sure you'll hear more about that later. But she runs a powerful, high converting website agency. She's a speaker, she's a property investor. She made a pretty bold decision to leave her corporate world about 4 years ago. She relocated to Mexico, took a one-way flight, and embarked on her entrepreneurial journey. And in her first 12 months alone, she generated over $80,000 in sales through her coaching business. And since then, she's transitioned into running a full-time web design agency. And with her unique expertise, she has empowered over 100 coaches, consultants, and service providers to scale their businesses by leveraging the potential of establishing a strong online presence and converting those leads into sales. And all during that time, she has a journey like most of us do, going from something that wasn't quite us into her fully expressed authentic self. And I cannot wait to hear about it. Elaine, thank you so much for being here.
Yay! Thank you so much. So appreciate you.
So Elaine, from where you started in the before times to where you are now, I know that in your story, there were a lot of things that you had to overcome. You carried around facades and expectations like the rest of us, that you had to work through and decide what worked for you and what didn't before getting to where you are on your journey now. Can you tell me a little bit about what did that look like for you? Where were you in those times? And what were the things that you were trying to overcome to be more authentic in your life?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have been on the social media world for the last decade before meeting you, Sharon, before, starting this whole business. As you mentioned, I went on that one-way flight to Mexico, never looked back, and now I own a property there. And I used to run this travel Instagram account. I'm going to do a little bit of storytelling here, where I used to, and I still do. I love sharing cool stuff. I love sharing photos. And I remember during one of my trips to Europe, I think I was like at the age of like 20, 24, 25. I was traveling through Europe, having that like eat, love, pray moment, when you're just solo traveling, you're wearing a
Yep.
cute little outfit, you're just eating your way through Italy. And I met this man on my trip. And it was absolutely a love at first sight type of a story. We met on a walking tour, one of those free walking tours that you can get at a city, learning about the city, trying out new things, new foods. And from that end forward, we traveled together for the next 2 months together, all
Wow.
around Europe, to Greece, to Santorini, and just falling in love under the stars and the moons. And
Oh,
hiked Mount Everest Base Camp together as well. And from that point forward, he invited me to move to Australia on a one-way ticket. And so
Wow.
at the age of 26, I believe 26, 27, I booked a one-way flight, moved to Australia for him, and I started curating this perfect romantic relationship that we
Wow.
had. And it was so curated because at that time, there was absolutely signs that, he was a narcissist, a little bit of gaslighting, a little bit of, we were absolutely in a bit of a toxic relationship, but I wanted to paint this picture that we were this incredible couple, like traveling through, I really in my head I wanted to be hopeless romantic, and I wanted to, showcase, our incredible travels around Australia together. We were going up to Byron Bay, and I just remember like bringing my little tripod to Byron Bay and just, lying on the beach, and I'm just like, let me just stick a tripod up and take some like coupley photos of us making out, and just PDA and whatnot, and just posting on Instagram. So on Instagram, it was a perfect world because I wanted to showcase that my lifestyle in Australia was going really well, because I'm originally from Vancouver, Canada, and on the other side of the world, my family, my friends, and I was basically putting up a facade because I wanted to showcase that my life was perfect. My life was great. I was working a corporate job, while being on a working holiday visa. And a lot of, I don't know if you know what a working holiday visa is, but basically, if you're under the age of 30 or 35, you're able to go to some of these different countries around the world and be able to work there and get paid there while being to live there at the same time. And it's a lot easier to get than,
Yeah.
after a certain age. And so at that time, I was like very happy to be in a corporate job, to have like this quote unquote perfect relationship. But obviously, there was a lot of signs that I couldn't see at that time. So then after that, I had a bit of an awakening. And since then, now I'm able to recognize those types of signs. And obviously, we didn't work out at the end. We did break up. I think about 10 months down the line, we broke up. We did try to do the whole living together thing and, trying out this whole journey together. But when you are traveling and you meet a man or you meet a person while traveling, and you go through this beautiful relationship, it gets very deep and emotional and intense. I don't know if you've been through one of these travel romances before, but it's so intense because you're with each other 24/7. You're sharing a lot of different stories. You're doing all these different things together. You're on this like honeymoon journey. But when you actually live with each other, and you're in the same in their town, or they're in your
Right.
town, it's very different because you're starting from scratch again. And when I moved to Australia, I was very much like no friends. I didn't have anyone, to lean on for support. I didn't really have my own community. I had to start from everything from scratch versus my ex back then had everything around him, right? He built a
Yeah.
community around him. He's been living there for many, many years. And so for me, everything felt very out of my comfort zone. And so
Yeah.
therefore I wanted to put this facade story up. But
Well, it's so interesting that we all do. I think many of us, I think a lot of people listening will resonate with what you're saying, because I think we get into some of these situations where we think there's a way that we should be, or people expect us to be, or that we truly want to be. And so we try to package it as that, as a substitution for what's really there. And I can imagine that certainly when you're traveling, that's a romantic, emotionally charged environment, that it makes it really easy to look past all of the things that maybe aren't quite so great and then just do that. I mean, I think a lot of people will resonate with that. So it sounds like basically you're doing this. At some point, you recognize there were some things that weren't quite right, and I think that's what happens, to a lot of us. I call them life quakes. I think you remember that from our time working together. These life quakes happen, or we have some kind of realization, and then you have a choice. You either ignore it and keep trying to have the experience that you were pursuing, or there's those moments, that sort of crossroads, where you decide this is not right for me and I need to do something else. And so, what was that like for you once you recognized that and you thought, I need to get back on track with who I really am?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I feel like we're always going through a time of reclaiming our identity. There's different times. At that time when I broke up with my ex-boyfriend, I knew at that time, at that moment, that I needed to find somewhere I can feel safe in. So I did end up moving back to Canada, restarting my career here and rebuilding that. And then after that, when I realized at the age of 27 or not 27, 28, when I started my business, I did go through a bit of a spiritual awakening as well of becoming more self-aware, understanding like the science behind human behavior, human design, and just being able to like notice early red flags in the early stages of that. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, I think we go through different stages in our life and always finding the green signs and yeah.
I find it so interesting. In fact, it's really one of the reasons that a few years ago I worked with you to help me better understand things like Instagram, which I call the three ring glitter circus, and learn something new about how to show up in the world with my message because you are not in midlife. And what's so exciting about that is, and I think what was the leap of faith for me was being open and curious about other people's perspectives, even people who than me. Because I think what's interesting about women who are coming up behind those of us who are at midlife and beyond is I feel like they more quickly or sooner in life figure out that sense of self agency. I think they figure out a little bit better how to more strongly stand in their own identity. Sure, we all struggle with the same expectations and belief stories and all of the made up rules and regulations about how to be acceptable and loved and
Yeah.
all of that. But I really feel like exactly what you said, that in your 20s, you already had enough, presence to start to recognize those signs sooner. And I think it's so interesting to hear perspectives from people who have had that experience as well, because it's really easy to think, oh, well, you have to have decades of life experience to know yourself, which clearly is not true if somewhere in there you have that confidence. And so I guess I'm curious, you know, what did that feel like every time you stepped into that next version of truth? How does it feel to stay committed to your path, even if it looks crazy on the outside and eclectic and changing your mind? And we have all this external pressure that you pick your career and you go with it, or you pick your person and you go with it, or all of these things. What is that like to own that and then stay committed even with all of the outside expectations?
Yeah, no, definitely. Like shifting back into business, say like living your truth is really about the different personas, different identities that you show up online, right? For example, like for myself, if you follow me, if you see my stories, like I'm a very genuine, real person. Like I like to share different parts of me. Like I have like my little sales hat on. I'll talk about my services, but then I'll also have different hats on of talking about my dating life because I am a hella busy entrepreneur and I'm going through the process of dating at the moment, of finding my soulmate partner. But then I will also share that part because there's so many busy female entrepreneurs right now who are just, so drilled into their business that they're like, I don't have time to date. Like, or
Yeah.
maybe they resonate with some of my dating stories that I like to share. And so I do like to have different sides of me. I like to share, some of the struggles that comes with being an entrepreneur, some of the struggles of running the agency. It's not a perfect dream sometimes. Sometimes we do make mistakes. Sometimes we have a bad month or whatnot, right? In terms of bad month is what I'm trying to say, like bad sales month, like or
Right.
maybe a failed launch. Like I have been so open about failed launches, right? But then I feel like it's so, so important to be able to express that truth and not to just share what are your highlights. The
Yeah.
highlights of you is not the real you, because the authenticness and the truth of you is when you do share those other pieces and those other sides, because you actually allow for your audience to resonate you instead of putting you on some sort of pedestal of, you know, so yeah.
But isn't it interesting though how, I know that I do a lot of work with people about figuring that out inside themselves to, live in their lives that way. But for some reason, I think for many of us, certainly, those of us who are in my position where there's a disconnect between, we know that's the work that we need to do as just humans in the world, but somehow we don't always see the connection to doing that work if we are going to have an online presence. It almost feels like there's a different kind of pressure that we either just don't know how, or it's harder to resist the pressure to be something we're not online. Is there, I'm sure that with your clients, you run into that. And what are the kind of things that you talk about, or the things that you teach about how to translate all of this work that we do to be authentic in our lives to being more brave about being authentic in our online presence as well, whether it's in our business or however we're using social media?
I believe the reason why people could be so afraid of showing up online is really coming through their inner thoughts of like, what if my auntie from this family sees me online? What if my, ex friend sees me online or whatnot? Like, there's a lot of like self judgment that comes through you that maybe prevents you from taking that layer off of you and actually showing your up online and expressing your fullest truth, right? And for myself, when I go through a phase like that, like there's going to be moments in time where I'm like very much like, I don't want to show up online. I don't want to be on stories right now. I'm going through a bit of a, identity crisis. I've been through some of these throughout my journey, and it's okay. It's knowing that it's okay to show up when you know it's the right time to show up online, when you have like something to share to show up online.
I wonder too if there's something about the online world that it just feels more intense. It just feels like it feels more amplified, right?
Yeah.
It's more amplified than real life. So there does seem to be that pressure that we have to keep up some sort of appearance, and that we can't, blast out our personal stuff, even though we've developed maybe some bravery to do that in our real life. And I think it's very difficult to make that jump into, oh, I can do this online, because everything is more, I think, amplified, even politically, lifestyle wise, all of these things that we get bombarded with every day that are so curated. It's really hard to break away from that and say, no, I can be myself. And I really think that that's why a lot of people, myself included, are so hesitant to experiment much in social media, is because we have this anxiety about not being good enough. And we feel like we have to fight those battles all over again in a completely
Yeah.
different world. And I don't know if there's been conversations that you've had with your clients, kind of talking them down off that ledge, but what would that conversation look like if you were telling someone that it's going to be okay, you can do this, and here's why?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great question. The first thing is I would deep dive into their fears. Like, tell me more. Like, what is scaring you? What is that fear? Why is that scaring you? And go deeper and deeper, right? The more you ask yourself why, the deeper that you get into the
So
core
true.
truth of what's really holding you back. And sometimes it's like a childhood memory of like, ooh, someone said this to me at a very young age, or I've been shut off, or I've been, abandoned, or there's some sort of reasoning behind it that's attached to this belief that you have, and you have to
Yeah.
shift that belief through rewiring your subconscious, right? And that's something I used to teach NLP, and I used to do all the coaching, and I still enjoy it. I still love being able to like reprogram and rewire my clients' mind when, sometimes when they're looking to like launch their website or they're creating their content for their website or whatnot, we'll deep dive into it, and which is super fun. And yeah, like I think at the end of the day, it's all in your mind. It's has nothing to do with the actual action of taking that action of filming that next Instagram story, of putting that post out there, of sharing your story. Because at the end of the day, people really think about themselves at the end of the day. When they're on
So
social
true.
media, they're scrolling or whatnot, they're really thinking about themselves. They're not really thinking about you or thinking about that other person or whatever. It's really much in your mind, and in the moment you shift that, and the moment you actually step out of it and step into your truth and knowing that you have something very valuable that the world actually needs to hear, that's when everything shifts. That's when you step into your fullest expression, and you start building that brand presence, right? Because once you can do that, once you can step out of that, like the world is your oyster. The online space is your oyster. There's so many different platforms. Like with you, Sharon, you have, your long form platform with the podcasting. You're able to speak for like the next 20 to 30 minutes and just really like sharing and expressing yourself. There's so many different ways to do it. You can do it in written form as well, right?
Yeah,
So,
that's really well said. I think it sounds like we have to maybe stop treating the online world in all of its forms as something that's different from the life that we're already living. It's another outlet, another way to do it. But the same things that we do to be authentic in real life, we could absolutely do online, and we don't have to, think that that's the thing I think I learned the most is that people think about you about 99% less than you think they do. Like nobody's thinking about you. We are not special snowflakes. People are thinking about themselves. So once you realize that, and unfortunately, a lot of us don't realize that until we get to be older, 40, 50, 60 years old, where we finally just say, I don't care. I wish I would have known what I know now, and I would have done probably a lot more courageous things that I didn't do because I was worried what someone else was thinking about, because now I know they weren't thinking about me. What would you, so we talk a lot about this, obviously, journey to brave. How would you describe, what does brave really mean for you in your life?
yeah. For me, being brave isn't about jumping out of a plane or hiking Mount Everest base camp and, really like doing these extreme things. It's
Yeah.
actually about living your fullest expression, living out your authenticity, right? And,
Yeah.
people often think that they need to do brave things that totally feel out of reach. That is
Right.
difficult.
Yeah.
Like, "Ooh, I can't take that step, right?" For me, being brave can just be as simple as setting your boundaries and saying no, and knowing when to let go, and when to make those small little day-to-day decisions that can positively impact your mental health and your mental well-being, right?
Yeah. No, that's really well put. I totally agree with you. What would you say to someone who, so think of me 3 years ago when you met me. So there's a lot of people I know that listen to this podcast who are probably right there. I mean, I've come a little ways, not as far as I probably could, but what would be like one really powerful thing that somebody who's really on the fence about it could either do or think about or learn just to get started?
Ooh, it's a really good question. It would be to taking that small action that actually feels comfortable for you. So
Yeah.
whether it's in written, whether it's actually taking a phone out and filming a video of you speaking on camera, it could just be like, here's what I did today. I'm super grateful for what's happening in my life. Or, yeah, I think starting with gratitude actually might be easier than sharing your shits and your challenges online.
Yeah.
Like, I
No,
think we forget
totally.
to just, allow ourselves to flex, because the thing is, like, when you're not actually like flexing when it's your real life, right? If this is the real lifestyle that you have, and you have, you know, the things that you have or whatnot, don't be afraid to share it online, because it is real. It's true. You get to, live this lifestyle, for example, right? So
Yeah.
don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to flex your life.
I love that. That's going to be like, that's a new quote that we need to have. Don't be afraid to flex your life. So with what you're doing now, you're in this
Mhm.
whole new place. How can we best know more about you? How can we best support you? What you're doing right now in your life? Tell us a little bit about it. We're going to put links and stuff in the show notes for people that want to know more, but tell us what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm working on a few different things. I'm a very multi-passionate entrepreneur like you, Sharon, and lots of things going on. But one of the most exciting things that I'm working towards is starting a outsourcing VA agency.
Cool.
But right now I do run a full-time website design agency. So we're just adding on a new service. And yeah, you can always find me on Instagram if you DM me my full name on Instagram, Elaine Tsung, but send me a little DM. Let me know that you came from Sharon's community. I would love to obviously connect with you. And yeah.
Ah, I love that. Yeah, and obviously a testament to how amazing I think that you are. It's been probably 2 years since we've worked together, but it really had such an impact on me and how I thought about myself, particularly in the online world, and some of the work that we did in the early stages of me learning even how to start to tell my story. So I'm just so grateful for that. And so, yeah, hopefully I want people to go and learn more about you. You are amazing. So we've stayed in touch, and we'll continue to do so. And I really appreciate you coming and sharing your story.
Thank you so much, Sharon. I so appreciate you.
Hey, thanks for listening to A Brave Journey. I'm so happy you were here. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow and leave a review, and share this with a friend who could benefit too. See you next time.